Part 2. Okay, we're ready to add some content to this lesson on the writing process. We have our settings page configured the way we want, and we've landed on this page here, the Edit tab at the top of our lesson. Moodle asks us, what would we like to do first? I'd like to focus our attention on two links in this list, Add a Content page and Add a Question page. These are the two most useful pages as you build your content from scratch. If you'd like to import questions from a quiz inside your Moodle course, you can do so with the first link. The second link, Import PowerPoint, is intended for you to upload a PowerPoint and have it flow into pages of your lesson. Unfortunately, as of the time this recording was made, Moodle.org acknowledges that this feature is not working properly. The Add a Cluster item is something that, I'll confess, I have never used. I've made dozens of lessons in Moodle, and while this is intended for you to group your pages together, I just don't use it. I find it easier to navigate without it. So, content pages and question pages. Let's start with a content page. A content page contains no questions and no possible answers. This is where you deliver the meat of your content. It's good to start out any lesson with an introduction page. As I mentioned in part 1, the introduction is a good opportunity to tell your students what will be covered in the lesson and how long it will take them. When they look at the introduction page, they won't be able to see the depth and the length of the whole lesson, so give them that information here. Below the content area, you have your first opportunity to create jumps. At least one jump is required, so if you're just having them turn the page, you can type the word continue or next. Then turn the setting for jump into next page. If you'd like them to follow more than one path, say for example in the writing process, you could fill out as many of these content fields as you wanted. Remember in part 1 where I said that we would determine how many possible answers there were with a setting? We turn that setting to 6 and take a look. Lo and behold, there are 6 possible buttons. That's why I said to aim high. You can always not use the extras, but when you make that setting, give yourself enough room to grow. For the writing process, my first item will be pre-writing. My second item will be draft. My third item will be revise, and so on. In my introduction, I might write, now, each of these jumps will need to be configured once I build the page for pre-writing, the page for draft, and the page for revise. I'm just going to leave the jump as next page for right now. It's kind of cyclical. You set up your page with the options, then you build each page for your options, then you come back and configure the jumps. Below our content area, you'll see two settings, arrange content buttons horizontally and display in left menu. If you'd like the introduction page to be shown in the left-hand menu that displays on the side of your lesson, check the box. If you'd like your options down below, all your different jumps, to be arranged horizontally across the page, check this box. Why might you display them vertically? Well, maybe your buttons are really long. So what if pre-writing was to say, learn how to brainstorm? You know, the longer these get, the further across the page your buttons will have to stretch if they're all lined up horizontally. So I'm going to say arrange them horizontally because mine are relatively short. Click Add a Question page. Heads up, in Moodle 2.0, this vocabulary is wrong. You're not actually adding a question page. You're adding a content page. So that button at the bottom is misleading. I'll have to tell the Moodle folks about that one. All right, when you're finished adding this page, you're dropped off back on your Edit tab, and you can see your introduction with your jumps and a menu to add a new page. It's at this point that we might add another content page, maybe about the pre-writing process or the draft process. Let's start it. I don't really have any more paths to go down, but I do need to create a continue button or a next button so that they can answer a question about pre-writing. So I might put continue, and it'll jump to the next page. Any of these fields that I leave blank will just be skipped. Let's do the same thing and add a content page for each of our other topics. Now my lesson's really starting to have some structure. We've got our 3 areas here, and we're ready for some questions. So let's say I want to ask a question about pre-writing. I'm going to use the menu for adding a new page in line with pre-writing, because wherever I add a new page, it's going to fall after the menu that I use. Take a look. Question. First, select a type of question. Take a look at your options. I'm going to do a multiple choice and add a question page. The title for my page will be Question About Pre-Writing. And my contents should be the question. If your question has multiple correct answers, check the box. For each possible answer, you're going to provide an answer and feedback or a response that your students get if that's the answer they choose. Since my question is for them to choose all of the following that are part of the pre-writing stage, then I'm going to give them several answers. Brainstorming. That's correct. Defining your purpose. That's correct. Editing with a peer. Sorry, that's not correct. How does Moodle know what's correct and what's not? Well, brainstorming and defining your purpose are both correct answers, so I'm going to give them a score. Now, this score could be a 5 and a 5, or this score could be a 1 and a 1. If I set my lesson up to be worth 100 points, I don't have to have all of my questions add up to 100. I could, but the way that Moodle will handle them in the lesson is that they will average them. So you'll get a 90% out of 100% if you get 90% of the questions correct. The points don't have to add up to be exactly the total that you've determined. Then, make sure you set the jump for each page. When I expand my jump menu, I see this page, next page, the previous page, end the lesson, an unseen question if I want to make it random, and I see all my other content pages. So wherever I want to go, I can steer them. If they get this question right, I'd like them to move on to learning about the draft. I could also have them go back to the introduction to choose another path. Either way is fine. This one takes them to draft, and this one takes them to draft. Now, what if they get the answer wrong? Well, I'm going to point them back to the information on pre-writing so that they can review it and maybe try again. There we go. Save your question page. See how it's starting to come together? Let's go back and configure our jumps. If I go to my introduction page, I see that all of my jumps just say next page. Well, that won't work because pre-writing, draft, and revise all need to be jumps to their own pages. Let's edit this page. Pre-writing should jump to pre-writing. Draft to draft. Revise to revising. Okay, how does this look to your students? Switch to the Preview tab. You'll find your introduction and your 3 buttons. Pre-writing takes me to pre-writing. Continue takes me to the question about pre-writing. And if I get it right, I'm dropped off at the next branch. Remember, you can use the HTML editor on these pages to make them as rich with content as you want. Embed a video or link to an article or drop in images and graphs so that your students are really thinking about your concepts throughout the lesson. Your questions then can get richer and can ask them about the media that you use. Have fun building your first lesson.